who are you? And where does the world come from?
I mean, they sound exactly like questions a small child might ask, from the backseat of a car on a long road trip.
They really do.
Yeah.
But they are the exact questions that launch our deep dive today. Welcome to the Book Nook. We are the community dedicated to exploring the most transformative books in personal growth, psychology, and spirituality.
We are always looking for those ideas that fundamentally alter the way you move through your daily life.
Exactly. And today, we are tackling what I can only call a true literary anomaly. It's called Sophie's World, a novel about the history of philosophy, and it's by Jostein Gaarder.
It really is an anomaly, isn't it? Gaarder managed to do something that honestly sounds completely impossible on paper. He wrapped this comprehensive, rigorous history of Western human thought, from the pre-Socratics all the way up to 20th century existentialism.
Right.
He wrapped all of that inside a suspenseful, reality-bending mystery novel. So you think you are just getting a beginner's guide to Socrates or Descartes, and suddenly the actual laws of physics in the narrative just start breaking down.
Yeah, it's wild. Let's jump right into the premise because it anchors all the heavy concepts we're going to explore today. So we follow this 14-year-old Norwegian girl named Sophie Amundsen.
Okay.
She lives in a sprawling suburb on the edge of the woods, and her life is entirely ordinary. She worries about homework, she hangs out with her best friend, she feeds her goldfish.
Just completely embedded in the routine of normal human existence.
Right, totally normal. But one afternoon, she checks her mailbox and finds two mysterious white envelopes. There are no stamps, no return address, just her name.
Oh, wow.
She opens the first envelope, and it's just a slip of paper with 3 words. Who are you? Then she opens the second, and it says, where does the world come from?
And that moment is it's the spark of a profound intellectual awakening for her. Because up until she opened those envelopes, Sophie had never actually paused to consider the absolute strangeness of her own existence.
No, she just took it as a given.
Exactly. The question, who are you, forces her to realize that her name, Sophie, is really just a label she was given. Her physical appearance, her circumstances, these were just conditions dumped on her at birth.
She didn't choose any of it.
Right. She didn't choose to be a human being. She didn't choose to exist at all. It forces her to step outside of herself and view her life not as this mundane routine, but as a bizarre, highly improbable phenomenon.
Which perfectly defines the mission of our deep dive today, really.
Right.
We're going to take this journey with Sophie, but we are not here just to recite a chronological list of dead philosophers.
No, definitely not.
We are diving into these sources to discover how 3,000 years of human thought can radically shift your perspective right now, today. The goal is to figure out how these concepts can help us wake up from the enchanted slumber of our daily routines.
That phrase, enchanted slumber, is so crucial. The anonymous philosophy teacher who starts sending Sophie these letters, a man we later learn is named Alberto Knox, he builds his entire curriculum on one foundational premise.
What's that?
He argues that the only thing required to be a good philosopher is the faculty of wonder.
The faculty of wonder.
Right?
And Alberto gives Sophie this central metaphor that is just incredibly striking. He asks her to imagine that the entire universe is a giant white rabbit being pulled out of a magician's top hat.
Such a great image.
Because it is an unfathomably large rabbit, the magic trick takes billions of years to complete. Now, when human beings are born, we are all born at the very tips of the rabbit's fine hairs.
We're out there on the absolute edge.
Yes, on the edge of existence, staring at the universe completely full of wonder. A baby is astonished by the magic trick.
But look at what happens as we age, The sheer scale and exposure of being at the tip of the rabbit's hair is overwhelming.
It's exhausting.
It really is. So as we grow up, we slowly crawl deep down into the comfortable, dense fur of the rabbit. We snuggle down into the warmth and safety of our daily routines.
Our jobs, our mortgages, our social media feeds.
Exactly. We become complacent. And there we stay for the rest of our lives, hidden in the dark fur, chatting comfortably about the weather, or, the price of groceries.
Right.
And Alberto argues that philosophers are the rare individuals who brave the perilous climb back up those fragile hairs. They claw their way back to the very edge to stare right into the magician's eyes and yell down to the rest of us, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are floating in space."
Ladies and gentlemen, we are floating in space. I love that.
Yeah.
But the people down in the fur don't even look up. They just grumble like, what a bunch of troublemakers. Pass the butter, please.
Pass the butter. Yeah.
It's tragically accurate. Gaarder illustrates this habituation with a brilliant little thought experiment about a family at the breakfast table.
Oh, right, the flying dad. So imagine a mother, a father, and a 2-year-old boy named Thomas having breakfast. Suddenly, the father lifts off his chair and starts casually hovering near the ceiling.
Just floating.
Yeah, just floating. If we look at the toddler's reaction, Thomas might point and say, "Daddy's flying." He might be amused, perhaps slightly surprised, but he isn't fundamentally shattered.
Why not?
Because to a 2-year-old, the world is already a place where inexplicable things happen constantly. His dad shaves with a loud buzzing machine, he climbs on ladders, he makes cars move. The child hasn't yet internalized the rigid rules of physics.
But the mother's reaction is entirely different. She turns around, sees her husband floating, drops her coffee mug, and screams in absolute terror.
She might need to be hospitalized for shock.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And the reason she reacts this way isn't because she's less intelligent than the toddler. It's because she has learned the rules of the game. She has become a slave to habit. She has observed gravity working the exact same way every single day of her life, so her brain has categorized it as an absolute certainty. When that certainty is broken, her entire reality just collapses.
Exactly. The world has become a habit for the adult. We take gravity, consciousness, the existence of matter completely for granted. We accept the world as a matter of course.
Yeah.
A philosopher, on the other hand, consciously resists that habituation. To a philosopher, the world remains enigmatic, slightly unreasonable, and deeply mysterious. They strive to remain as thin-skinned and receptive as that toddler, regardless of their age.
So let me push back on Alberto Knox here for a second, because I think there's a practical problem with this.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's think about this in terms of learning a complex physical skill, like driving a car. When you first get behind the wheel, you possess that faculty of wonder, but mostly it manifests as sheer terror.
Oh, absolutely. Total panic.
You are hyper-aware of everything. The pressure of your foot on the pedal, the blind spots, the speed of the other cars. It is neurologically exhausting. But after 5 years, you drive home from work on complete autopilot.
You pull into your driveway and realize you don't even remember the last 3 miles.
Exactly. Our brains are literally designed to automate our existence to save caloric energy. Habituation is an evolutionary advantage. So if the philosopher is arguing that this mental efficiency is actually a spiritual death, I just have to ask, is it really practical to live in a constant state of astonishment?
It's a great question.
I mean, how do you get anything done if you're weeping with awe at the existence of your coffee cup?
That tension is really the core challenge of the human condition, and it's a very fair critique. You cannot function in this society if you are perpetually paralyzed by existential awe.
Right, you'd never leave the house.
Exactly. But the goal Alberto is pushing Sophie toward isn't functional paralysis, it's the maintenance of an inquiring mind. It's about preventing that biological automation from completely colonizing your inner life.
Oh?
You can let your basal ganglia drive your car home on autopilot, absolutely. But when you step out of the car, do you have the conscious capacity to look up at the night sky and remind yourself that you are a microscopic organism clinging to a spinning rock, hurtling through a dark, expanding void?
So it's about having the ability to climb back up the rabbit's hair when you choose to, rather than forgetting that the edge even exists.
Precisely. It's a conscious refusal to be completely indifferent.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about recognizing when you are hiding deep in the fur and intentionally forcing yourself to peek out. And when humanity first started poking its head out of the fur and trying to organize this chaotic reality, we didn't start with science. We started with myth.
Right. Before philosophy, human beings explained the terrifying randomness of the world through mythology. If there was a drought, it meant the gods were angry. If there was a thunderstorm, Thor was throwing his hammer. The monumental shift that kicks off the history of Western philosophy is the movement away from supernatural explanations toward natural ones. The early Greek philosophers looked at the world and said, there must be an underlying natural mechanism for all this change.
And one of the most brilliant mechanical breakthroughs came from a thinker named Democritus. Now, the book uses an analogy here that is just, well, it's perfect. Alberto asks Sophie, why is Lego the most ingenious toy in the world?
I love this part.
At first, Sophie is irritated. She's a teenager. She hasn't touched her Legos in years. But she digs them out of her closet, dumps them on the floor, and starts building. And she realizes Alberto is completely right. Legos perfectly demonstrate Democritus's atomic theory.
Yeah, let's look at the logic Democritus was dealing with here. He lived roughly 2,400 years ago, and he observed that nature is defined by constant transformation.
A tree grows, it dies, it rots.
Exactly. A river carves a valley, everything is in a state of flux. But Democritus reasoned that if everything is constantly dissolving, there must be some foundational building block that doesn't change.
Because otherwise?
Otherwise, if the fundamental pieces of the universe could rot or break down, reality would have dissolved into nothingness a long time ago. Therefore, nature must be built of tiny, invisible, eternal, and immutable blocks. He called them atoms, which in Greek means indivisible.
Which brings us right back to the Legos. Think about how a Lego block functions. You can take 100 green and brown Legos and build a tree. Then you can completely dismantle that tree, which simulates death or decay, and you are left with a pile of blocks.
And those individual blocks didn't change at all.
Right. Their shape, their color, their interlocking pegs are exactly the same. You can then take those exact same eternal pieces and build a castle or a car. The blocks are eternal, but the forms they create are temporary.
Democritus figured out the fundamental nature of physical matter using nothing but his own deductive reasoning.
It is a stunning intellectual achievement. But eventually, the Greek focus shifted. While thinkers like Democritus were obsessing over the physical mechanics of the universe, a new wave of philosophers realized that understanding the physical world didn't actually help humans understand how to live a good life.
Right, they needed practical guidance.
Exactly. The focus shifted from the cosmos to human society, ethics, and morality. And the central figure of this shift was Socrates.
Alberto refers to Socrates as the Joker in a deck of cards.
The Joker.
Yeah. In society, you generally have two types of cards. You have the red cards, people who are absolutely dogmatically certain that they know all the answers. And you have the black cards, people who are completely apathetic and just don't care about the questions at all.
Okay, that tracks.
But then you have the Joker. Socrates troubled the elite of Athens because his entire worldview was based on one highly irritating premise. Wisest is she who knows she does not know.
He weaponized intellectual humility.
He really did. He understood that human beings are faced with incredibly profound questions like, what is justice? What is virtue? To which we have no easy answers. But instead of faking it or ignoring the questions, Socrates walked around the public square engaging people in dialogue.
Using the Socratic method.
Exactly, which is essentially playing dumb. He would ask questions, feign ignorance, and slowly force the person he was talking to into a corner where they had to admit the logical contradictions in their own beliefs.
I can definitely see why they executed him.
Oh, yeah.
If you go up to a powerful politician and publicly demonstrate that they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, you make very dangerous enemies. But there is a real challenge here for us today. When you look at how we communicate now, especially in digital spaces, everyone is a red card.
So true. Everyone performs absolute certainty online.
Socrates is a great reminder that pretending to know everything is an actual barrier to insight.
Exactly. Socrates believed that true insight comes from within, through rigorous rational examination. You can't just be handed the truth, you have to give birth to it yourself.
Right.
And his most famous student, Plato, took this emphasis on rational insight and built it into an absolute architectural system.
Right.
Plato didn't just want to know what justice was, he wanted to understand the structural difference between what is eternal and what is temporary.
And to explain Plato's massive philosophical architecture, Alberto asks Sophie another seemingly simple question. How can a baker bake 50 absolutely identical cookies?
The answer is entirely mechanical, right? The baker uses a pastry mold. You roll out the dough, you press the star-shaped mold into it 50 times, and you get 50 star cookies.
Simple enough.
But even if one cookie gets a bit scorched in the oven, or one is slightly thicker than the others, they all share an undeniable fundamental starness. They are identical because they originate from the exact same perfect mold.
And Plato takes that concept and applies it to the entire universe. You walk through a forest and see 1,000 different pine trees. Some are tall, some are stunted, some are missing branches, but they all share a fundamental pineness.
Yes, pineness.
Plato asked, where does that universal concept come from? His answer was radical. He argued that there must be an eternal, perfect mold or form of a pine tree that exists in a completely different dimension.
Plato split reality into two distinct realms. First, you have the sensory world, the physical world we live in. Everything in this world is flawed, degrading, and temporary. It flows. A physical horse will eventually go lame, die, and rot away.
It's like a cookie made of dough eventually crumbles.
Exactly. But behind this physical world, Plato argued, is the world of ideas. This is a realm of perfect, eternal, immutable forms. The concept of a horse, the perfect mold, exists there eternally. Our physical world is just a realm of flawed, dissolving shadows cast by those perfect ideas.
We really have to touch on the allegory of the cave here because it makes this so vivid. Plato says to imagine a group of people chained inside a dark cave facing a blank wall. Behind them is a fire, and people walk in front of the fire carrying objects.
So the prisoners only ever see the shadows dancing on the wall.
Right. For them, the shadows are reality. But if one prisoner breaks free, turns around, and walks out of the cave into the blinding sunlight, he realizes the shadows were just illusions. The sunlight, which is the world of ideas, is the true reality.
And Plato took this to its ultimate poetic conclusion. He believed that the human soul is immortal. Before we were born into physical bodies, our souls actually resided in that perfect world of ideas. We lived among the perfect molds.
But the trauma of birth causes us to forget them.
Yes. However, when we walk through the sensory world and see a physical horse, our soul experiences a faint, agonizing flicker of recognition. It vaguely remembers the perfect form of the horse. This stirs a profound longing, a homesickness within the soul to return to its true eternal realm. Plato called this yearning eros, or love. To Plato, the philosopher is the one who follows that homesickness out of the cave.
It is an incredibly beautiful, poetic way to view existence. But, it feels deeply unintuitive to how we actually learn things.
Yeah.
And that brings us to Aristotle, who was Plato's star pupil for 20 years, but ended up tearing down his master's entire dual reality system.
It really did.
So if Plato thought the eternal mold existed first, and the physical tree was just a shadow of it, how did Aristotle systematically dismantle that?
Aristotle basically looked at Plato and said, you have the process entirely backward. Aristotle argued that the physical sensory world is the only reality. He said that there is absolutely nothing in the human mind that has not first been experienced through our physical senses.
So we aren't born with souls full of forgotten ideas.
Right. Aristotle believed the human mind is essentially empty at birth. How do we get the idea of a horse? We look out into the physical world and we see a horse. Then we see another one. Then another. Over time, our minds observe the shared characteristics, 4 legs, hooves, a mane, and our brains actively synthesize those observations into a conceptual category. The idea of a horse doesn't exist in some magical eternal dimension. It is just a concept we manufactured in our own minds after experiencing physical reality.
He flips it from top down to bottom up. Aristotle is essentially the ultimate organizer. He realizes that human beings are obsessive categorizers. We walk through the chaos of nature and start putting things into mental boxes to make sense of them.
Exactly.
We separate living things from dead things. We separate plants from animals. We separate dogs from cats. Alberto actually inspires Sophie to use Aristotelian logic on her own life, which results in her finally cleaning her chaotic bedroom.
That scene grounds the philosophy perfectly. Sophie looks at her messy room, which is essentially chaos, and she starts sorting. She puts all the books on one shelf, all the sweaters in one drawer, all the socks in another. By imposing categories on her physical space, she is using the exact mechanism Aristotle used to explain the natural world. He was the first great biologist, taxonomy builder, and logician. Every time we build a database or organize a filing system today, we are operating in Aristotle's shadow.
So Aristotle builds this incredibly robust, categorized view of the world. And it held sway for a very long time. But eventually it hits a wall. If we move forward through history, past the Middle Ages, we arrive at a massive intellectual crisis.
A huge one.
By the time we hit the 17th century, the Baroque period, humanity has invented the telescope and the microscope. The scientific revolution is happening. Suddenly, the physical world isn't behaving the way Aristotle said it should.
Right. The Earth isn't the center of the universe anymore.
Exactly. Blood circulates through the body like a machine. And if the old scientific framework is completely wrong, it creates a terrifying intellectual vacuum. This is the intellectual necessity that forces our next major philosopher, René Descartes, to take the stage.
The collapse of the medieval worldview left thinkers in a state of profound anxiety. The Baroque era was deeply polarized. You had materialists like Thomas Hobbes arguing that everything, including human thoughts and consciousness, is just the mechanical movement of microscopic particles in the brain.
Just meat machines, basically.
Pretty much. On the other side, you had idealists arguing that everything is spirit. Descartes looked at this fractured landscape and realized that before anyone could claim to know anything, they needed a completely new, unbreakable foundation for knowledge.
Descartes decided he had to clear the entire construction site. He realized that the knowledge handed down from authorities was flawed. But more terrifyingly, he realized his own senses were flawed. He asked, how do I know I'm not dreaming right now?
Have you ever had a dream that was so vivid you completely believed it was real?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wake up in a cold sweat.
Yes, exactly. If our senses can deceive us in dreams or through optical illusions, we cannot trust them to provide absolute truth. Descartes engaged in radical methodological doubt. He decided to doubt absolutely everything that could possibly be doubted.
Right.
He even hypothesized that an evil demon might be controlling his mind, feeding him a fabricated illusion of a world.
It's the original plot of The Matrix, hundreds of years before the movie. He strips away his belief in the physical world, his body, the sky, the earth. But at the absolute bottom of this abyss of doubt, he hits bedrock. He realizes there is one single thing he cannot doubt.
What's that?
The fact that he is doubting.
And if he is doubting, there must be a subject doing the doubting. If he is thinking, there must be a thinker. Hence his famous conclusion, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am.
Ooh.
He proved his own existence as a thinking entity through pure rational deduction, completely independent of sensory experience. From that single, unbreakable brook, Descartes began to rebuild a philosophical system, asserting a strict division between the mind, which is immaterial, and the body, which is a mechanical machine.
It's a masterpiece of critical thinking. But right on his heels comes Baruch Spinoza, and Spinoza looks at Descartes' strict separation of mind and body and God and nature and says, no, that's completely wrong. It's all one thing.
Yeah, Spinoza was not having it.
Spinoza was a lens polisher by trade, and he wanted to polish the lens through which humanity viewed the cosmos.
Spinoza was a pantheist. He argued against Descartes' dualism. For Spinoza, there aren't two substances. There is only one substance, which he called God or nature. Everything that exists, every thought, every physical object, every person is just a temporary expression or a mode of this one singular substance.
So we are to the universe what a single wave is to the ocean.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And this leads to an idea that is deeply unsettling. If everything is just an expression of one continuous infinite nature, then everything operates according to the absolute laws of that nature, which means Spinoza was a strict determinist. He did not believe in free will.
To understand the mechanics of Spinoza's determinism, we can look at the analogy of the baby that Alberto uses in the text. He asks Sophie to pinpoint the exact moment a human being attains free will.
Okay.
At age 2, a child cries when hungry. Is that free will? No, it's biology. At age 4, she is afraid of the dark. Is that a free choice? No, it's an evolutionary instinct. At age 15, she experiments with her identity. Is she choosing freely, or is she reacting to the complex web of social conditioning, hormones, and peer pressure?
Let's apply this to an adult. Think about the career you chose. You might feel like you sat down at age 20 and freely decided to become an accountant. But Spinoza would look at that and say, look at your underlying mechanics. You have a genetic predisposition toward low-risk tolerance. You were raised by parents who struggled financially, which conditioned you to seek stability. You graduated during an economic recession. Your choice to become an accountant wasn't a free, uncaused action. It was the inevitable mathematical result of your genetics, your environment, and the laws of cause and effect.
That's it, exactly.
Spinoza says we are like a thumb on a hand. The thumb can move, it can bend, but it can only move according to its nature as a thumb. It can't detach itself and jump around the room.
It's a claustrophobic thought, honestly. We feel free only because we are conscious of our actions, but ignorant of the underlying causes that dictate them. However, Spinoza actually believed this realization is the key to true happiness.
Really? How so?
If you understand that everything happens through absolute necessity, you stop being angry, you stop feeling regret, and you achieve a state of inner peace. You accept the universe exactly as it unfolds.
Wow, okay, so we have the rationalist Descartes and Spinoza using pure logic to deduce these massive absolute systems of reality. But across the English Channel, the British empiricists were deeply skeptical of all this armchair theorizing. They looked at rationalism and said, you cannot figure out the universe just by thinking in a dark room.
The empiricists, primarily John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume, dragged philosophy back to the physical world. Locke resurrected Aristotle's idea of the tabula rasa, the blank slate. He argued that before we have sensory experiences, the mind is a bare blackboard.
Right.
We have no innate ideas. Everything we think we know must be traceable back to a simple sensory experience.
But David Hume is the one who takes this empiricism and drives it right to the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
Hume wanted to strip away all the woolly, unprovable concepts we use to comfort ourselves. And his attack on how we perceive cause and effect is absolutely mind-bending.
It really is. Hume challenged the most fundamental assumption of both daily life and science, the law of causality. We assume that if event A happens, it absolutely must cause event B, but Hume pointed out that we never actually experience causality. We only ever experience sequence.
I really want to unpack this because it sounds crazy at first. Hume says, imagine I hold a stone in the air and I let it go. It falls to the ground. Why did it fall? Everyone listening would say, because of the law of gravity. The drop caused the fall.
Yeah.
But Hume says, stop. Have you ever actually seen the law of gravity? Have you ever physically observed the invisible causal link between my hand opening and the stone hitting the dirt? No.
Yeah.
You have only seen two separate sequential events. Event 1, hand opens.
Yeah.
Event 2, stone hits ground.
Exactly. Hume argued that because we have seen event A followed by event B thousands of times, our minds develop a psychological expectation, a habit. When the hand opens, we expect the stone to fall. But habit is not logical proof. A child who drops a stone for the first time has no expectation. If the stone floated upward, the child wouldn't be horrified, because the child hasn't formed the mental habit yet.
So if we look at how a sports fan acts during playoffs, they wear their lucky jersey because the last 3 times they wore it, their team won. Event A followed by event B. The fan genuinely believes the jersey caused the win. We look at that and say it's a superstition.
Obviously.
But is Hume saying that our belief in the laws of physics is essentially just a grand, highly reliable superstition?
Yeah.
Are we just assuming the sun will rise tomorrow because it always has,
Yeah.
without any absolute logical proof that it must?
Yes. Hume is highlighting the problem of induction. Just because something has happened a million times in the past does not logically guarantee it will happen the 1,000,001st time. Hume isn't saying you should expect the sun not to rise or that you should jump out a window thinking you'll float. He was a practical man.
Good to know.
But philosophically, he was forcing humanity to admit a profound intellectual humility. He proved that our firmest, most fundamental beliefs about how reality operates are built on psychological habit, not rational certainty. We don't know the laws of nature. We only know what we've experienced so far.
And this relentless dismantling of our assumptions perfectly sets up the third British empiricist, George Berkeley. And here is where the history of philosophy and the plot of Gaarder's novel violently collide. Berkeley takes empiricism to its absolute reality-breaking extreme. If Hume said we can't prove causality, what does Berkeley say?
Berkeley asked a devastating question about the physical world. Locke and Hume admitted that we only know the world through our sensory perceptions, but they still believed there was actual physical matter out there causing those perceptions. Berkeley said, how do you know that?
Wow.
When you knock on a desk, you perceive hardness, you perceive a brown color, you perceive a rectangular shape, but you never perceive the matter itself. You only perceive qualities inside your own mind.
To be is to be perceived. That was his motto.
Precisely. Berkeley claimed that physical matter does not exist. The only things that exist are minds and ideas. The desk is just an idea you are perceiving. He argued that the entire reality we experience is merely a stream of perceptions being fed into our minds by a greater spirit, which he identified as God. God is the cause of everything we experience.
And as Alberto Knox is explaining this bizarre theory of immaterialism to Sophie, the narrative of the book literally cracks open. Strange things have been happening to Sophie. She finds a red silk scarf under her bed that belongs to someone named Hilde. She sees a talking dog. She finds letters addressed to Hilde.
Right.
Up until now, we, the readers, assumed this was magic or fantasy. But as Alberto explains Berkeley, he drops the bomb.
Yeah.
None of it is magic.
It's such a crazy twist. Alberto reveals to Sophie that they are not real people. They do not possess physical bodies. They are fictional characters. The world they inhabit is literally a story being typed on a typewriter by a United Nations major named Albert Nag, who is stationed in Lebanon.
Wait, really?
Yes. The major is writing the story as a philosophy crash course and a birthday present for his real 15-year-old daughter, Hilde Nag.
It is an existential gut punch. Berkeley's philosophy becomes the literal mechanical reality of the novel.
Yeah.
The spirit that is causing Sophie's entire reality isn't God. It's a middle-aged UN peacekeeper sitting at a desk in Lebanon.
It's wild.
When Sophie feels a raindrop, it's only because the major typed, a raindrop fell on Sophie's cheek. The form of the book becomes the philosophical content.
The psychological weight of this realization for Sophie is immense. Imagine discovering that all your childhood memories, your deepest fears, your perceived free will everything is just the daydreams of an author thousands of miles away. It's the ultimate loss of autonomy.
It is essentially the modern simulation hypothesis, the idea that our universe is just a digital simulation running on an advanced computer played out through a literary lens.
Exactly. It's brilliant because it completely disorients the reader. We thought we were safely outside the story, reading about a girl learning philosophy, but Alberto forces the reader into the same existential crisis. He tells Sophie that they are just a dream image in another person's sleepy consciousness.
Right.
But then he asks, what if the author, Major Albert Nag, is also just a character in a book? What if the Major and his daughter Hilde are just shadows in someone else's mind?
It creates an infinite regression, a box within a box within a box. If Sophie is a fiction of Albert, who is Albert a fiction of? The unsettling realization for the reader is that our reality might be just as contingent, just as immaterial as Sophie's.
But inside the narrative, Alberto and Sophie refuse to just lay down and accept their fate as ink on a page.
Good for them.
Alberto realizes that while the Major is controlling their world, the Major is using the chronological history of philosophy as the plot. The Major has to follow the curriculum. So Alberto decides they must race through the rest of the course to reach the Enlightenment and beyond, hoping to find an Archimedean point, a philosophical lever they can use to break out of the Major's mind.
And their first major hurdle in this escape plan is Immanuel Kant.
Kant steps in at a crucial moment in history to stop the bleeding. The rationalists said reason is everything. The empiricists, like Hume, had basically dissolved certainty into mere habit. Philosophy was at a stalemate. Kant came along and engineered a massive compromise. He argued that both sides were partly right and partly wrong.
How does he synthesize them mechanically?
Kant agreed with the empiricists like Hume that all our knowledge begins with raw sensory experience. But he agreed with the rationalists that our mind is not a passive blank slate. The mind actively shapes, filters, and structures that sensory data before we ever become conscious of it.
Alberto uses the analogy of red-tinted glasses. If you put on a pair of glasses with red lenses, everything you look at will be red. The world itself hasn't turned red, but because of the apparatus through which you are perceiving it, you literally cannot experience it any other way.
Right.
The glasses dictate the form of your reality. Kant argued that human consciousness comes equipped with built-in, immovable glasses.
Kant called these the forms of intuition. Specifically, he said we can only perceive reality through the filters of space and time. Space and time aren't physical objects out in the universe, they are the software our brains use to render the universe. Furthermore, Kant argued that causality, which Hume said was just a habit, is actually a built-in category of human reason.
Oh, interesting.
We are biologically wired to perceive cause and effect. We can't not see it.
If we modernize this, think about algorithms on social media. Your feed acts like Kantian glasses. The algorithm filters the raw data of the internet and only presents you with a specific, curated version of reality based on your past clicks. You think you are seeing the world, but you are actually seeing a structured, filtered representation.
That's a great comparison.
Kant said the human mind does this to the physical universe. We can never know the thing in itself, the world as it exists independent of us. We can only ever know the world as it appears through our human filter.
By establishing these limits, Kant secured a foundation for human knowledge. He proved that while we can't know the absolute nature of the universe, we can trust our shared human perception of it. But this static, structural view of reality was about to be swept away by G.W.F. Hegel, who introduced the dimension of time and history into philosophy in a way no one had before.
Hegel basically looks at the 2,000 years of philosophy we've just covered, everyone from Plato to Kant trying to find eternal, unchanging truths, and he says, you're all on a fool's errand. There is no eternal truth.
Hegel argued that human reason is not a static, eternal blueprint. Reason is dynamic. It evolves. It changes from generation to generation. Therefore, you cannot judge a philosopher from ancient Greece by the standards of the 19th century.
Alberto uses the metaphor of a river. History is a flowing river of thought. You can't point to one specific eddy in the water and say, this is the truest part of the river.
Right.
In the same way, a philosophical idea is only right relative to where it stands on the riverbank of history. For example, 2,000 years ago, brilliant minds like Aristotle defended slavery. Today, human reason has evolved to recognize slavery as an absolute moral horror. The truth evolved.
And Hegel identified the exact mechanical process by which this evolution happens. He called it the dialectic. It is the engine of human progress. It works through conflict and resolution.
Right, let's break down the mechanics of the dialectic. It operates in 3 steps: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Someone puts forward a strong claim or a way of doing things. That's the thesis. But eventually, the flaws or the extremes of that claim generate a backlash, a contradictory movement. That's the antithesis. These two forces clash. Finally, the tension is resolved by a new movement that takes the best elements of both and discards the garbage. That's the synthesis.
We can see this everywhere, not just in philosophy, it's how culture evolves.
Yes. Think about music genres.
Yeah.
In the 1980s, you had hair metal. It was characterized by massive stadium shows, excessive guitar solos, theatrical makeup, and pure hedonism. That was the cultural thesis.
Oh, totally.
But eventually, the sheer excess and artificiality of it triggered a backlash. In the early 90s, grunge music emerges from Seattle. It's the exact antithesis. It's raw, it's played in dirty clubs, the musicians wear thrift store flannel, and the lyrics are deeply angsty and anti-commercial. You have a clash.
Right.
But what happens by the 2000s? You get a synthesis. Modern alternative rock bands emerged that combined the raw, authentic emotional songwriting of grunge with the high production values and theatricality of stadium rock. The culture progressed through conflict.
That is a perfect Hegelian example. The tension between opposites is the friction that moves the world spirit forward.
But I have a serious concern with Hegel's worldview. If truth is just a flowing river, if what we believe today is guaranteed to be overturned or viewed as naive by people 100 years from now, doesn't that lead straight to moral relativism?
It's the most common critique of Hegel, yeah.
If everything is just a product of its time, how can you deeply, passionately commit to fighting for a cause? Why sacrifice yourself for a belief if it's just a temporary eddy in the river?
Right, but Hegel would argue that the river isn't meandering aimlessly. History has a trajectory. He believed that the world spirit is continually moving toward greater rationality, greater self-awareness, and greater freedom.
Okay.
Our actions today, our passionate arguments, our protests, our moral stands, they are not meaningless. They are the required friction. Without people passionately defending a thesis and others fiercely fighting for an antithesis, the dialectic engine stalls. The river becomes a swamp. We are the active, necessary agents that push the world spirit toward greater freedom.
We are the friction. I like that. It reclaims individual agency within this massive historical flow. But speaking of the individual, as the 19th century dawned, a lot of thinkers felt suffocated by these massive, overarching systems like Hegel's.
They did.
They felt the individual human being was being crushed by the weight of history and the world spirit. And this brings us into the modern age, marked by a massive divergence in thought.
We see two distinct reactions. First, the Romantics. They were deeply influenced by thinkers who saw the entire universe as one massive breathing organism. They sought to dissolve the ego into nature, emphasizing emotion, poetry, and unity.
Alberto uses the analogy of two bottles for Sophie. The red bottle represents romanticism. If you take a swig from the red bottle, your boundaries dissolve. You feel a profound mystical connection to the trees, the stars, humanity. You feel like you are the universe experiencing itself.
Sounds pretty good.
But then you have the blue bottle. And the blue bottle represents the ferocious, sharp individualism of the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard took a massive swig of the blue bottle and reacted violently against both the Romantics and Hegel. He looked at Hegel's grand system of historical progress and said, this is useless to a person who is actually suffering.
Yeah.
Kierkegaard believed that objective truths, the grand theories philosophers debate in universities, are entirely immaterial to a person's actual lived existence.
Alberto gives a very stark example. The equation 8 plus 4 equals 12 is an objective truth. It is mathematically undeniable. But Kierkegaard points out, do you include 8 plus 4 equals 12 in your evening prayers?
No, obviously not.
When you are lying on your deathbed, facing the terror of your own mortality, does the fact that 8 plus 4 equals 12 provide any comfort or meaning? Absolutely not. Objective truth is irrelevant to the soul.
For Kierkegaard, the only truths that matter are subjective truths. It's about the truths that are true for me. What matters is the individual's relationship to existence, the choices they make in fear and trembling, the leaps of faith they take. He shifted the focus of philosophy entirely away from the cosmos and history and placed it squarely on the shoulders of the solitary, agonizingly free individual.
He laid the groundwork for existentialism.
He really did. And from Kierkegaard, Alberto has to sprint to finish the course before the major ends the book. We get a rapid succession of thinkers who radically deconstruct how we view humanity. First, Karl Marx. Marx looks at Hegel's idea that ideas drive history and flips it upside down. He calls it historical materialism.
Let's explain the mechanics of this because it's a lens that changes how you view everything. The base is the economic reality, the tools we use, the way we produce goods, the division of labor. The superstructure is everything else, our laws, our religion, our art, and our moral values.
Marx argued that the base entirely dictates the superstructure.
To put it simply, how you survive dictates what you believe is good.
Exactly. If you live in an ancient nomadic hunter-gatherer society, that's your economic base, your society's highest moral virtues will be physical bravery, communal sharing, and tribal loyalty. Those virtues are the superstructure required to keep the hunting base functioning.
Makes sense.
But fast forward to a modern industrial capitalist society, the economic base is factory production and individual wage labor. Suddenly, the highest moral virtues shift. Now, society values punctuality, individual industriousness, and a fierce respect for private property. Marx is showing us that our deeply held morals aren't handed down from the heavens. They are largely a byproduct of how our society produces its goods.
It is a profoundly demystifying way to look at culture. And right alongside Marx demystifying society, we have Charles Darwin demystifying biology. Darwin publishes On the Origin of Species and removes humanity from its privileged central place in creation.
Darwin introduces evolution through natural selection. The philosophical impact of this cannot be overstated. Before Darwin, it was assumed that nature had a teleology of purpose. Eyes existed in order to see. Birds had wings in order to fly.
Right.
Darwin showed that nature has no premeditated purpose. Random genetic mutations occur. The mutations that provide a survival advantage in a specific environment get passed on. The ones that don't, die out. We are not the crown of creation. We are, as Alberto puts it, basically ships carrying a cargo of genes through the ocean of life. It's a purely mechanical, blind process.
Which leaves humanity in a very precarious position in the 20th century. We are no longer the center of a divinely ordered universe. We are biological accidents. We are driven by economic forces we barely control. This profound sense of alienation sets the stage for our final major philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre, the leading figure of French existentialism.
Sartre delivers perhaps the most intimidating philosophical statement of the modern era: existence precedes essence.
To understand what that means, Sartre uses the analogy of a paper knife or a letter opener. Before an artisan makes a letter opener, they have a concept of it in their mind.
Yeah.
They know what its purpose is to cut paper. They know what it will look like.
Right.
For the letter opener, its essence, its purpose, and design precedes its existence, its physical creation. For centuries, humans believed we were like the letter opener. We believed God had a plan for us, a human nature, a specific essence, and then created us to fulfill it.
But Sartre, operating from an atheistic standpoint, says no. For human beings, existence precedes essence. We just appear in the world. We exist first. There is no pre-written script. There is no innate human nature. There is no divine purpose handed down to us. We are just thrown into reality, and we have to figure it out from scratch.
And because there's no predetermined purpose, we are entirely responsible for creating our own meaning. This is why Sartre famously said, man is condemned to be free.
Condemned. That is such a heavy word choice.
It implies that freedom isn't a gift, it's a burden. Think about the anxiety of sitting at a restaurant with a 20-page menu. You have absolute freedom to choose, but the sheer volume of choices causes paralysis and anxiety.
Oh, definitely.
Now, apply that menu to your entire life. If there are no objective moral rules, no divine plan, no correct path, then every choice you make is entirely on your shoulders. You have to invent your own morality through your actions. It is terrifying, but it is also the ultimate call to authentic living.
You can't blame your parents, your society, or your biology.
You are the architect of your own essence.
And it is with this realization of absolute existential freedom that Sophie and Alberto execute their escape. They have reached the end of the philosophy course. They have armed themselves with everything from Socratic irony to Kantian perception to existential agency.
Right.
And they use Hegel's concept of negative thinking, finding the inherent contradictions in a system to break out of the Major's novel.
The climax of the book happens during a midsummer garden party for Sophie's 15th birthday. And it is absolute surreal chaos. Major Albert Nag is flexing his authorial muscles. He sends Alice in the Wonderland to the party. He sends a live troll. A car crashes.
It's pure narrative breakdown.
But Alberto uses the distraction. He stands up in front of the party guests and delivers a speech, revealing to them that they are all just fictional constructs in a peacekeeper's mind. The guests, completely habituated to their reality, just think he's crazy.
But while the Majors is distracted typing out this chaotic scene, Alberto and Sophie literally slip through the cracks of the text. They use the distraction to escape the narrative framework entirely. They cross over from the pages of the book into the real world, the world of Hilde and her father in Norway.
But it's not a clean fairy tale ending. They cross over, but they exist in Oslo as invisible spirits.
Yeah.
Yet cannot interact with the physical world. They can't move a coffee cup or speak to the people walking by. They can only observe.
Right.
They finally find Hilde and her father sitting by a glider, and they watch the gods who created them.
It is a deeply poignant, melancholic resolution. They have achieved freedom, yes. They crawled all the way up the rabbit's hair and stepped completely outside the illusion. But the cost of that ultimate perspective is that they can no longer participate in the material world, that they exist in the liminal space between imagination and reality. It's a phantom freedom.
It leaves you breathless. And as we wrap up this massive journey, we have to bring it back to the core mission of the Book Nook. Why does Sophie's world matter? Who is this 500-page philosophical mystery actually for?
This book is for anyone who feels overwhelmed by the mechanics of modern life. If you feel like you are stuck deep down in the rabbit's fur running on autopilot, stressed about the mundane, feeling like your days are just a blur of habit, this book is the antidote.
Yeah.
It offers a shortcut to being deeply well-informed about the structural evolution of human thought without ever feeling like you're reading a dry academic text. It gives you the tools to reclaim your faculty of wonder.
The ultimate takeaway here is that philosophy is not a luxury. It isn't just an academic exercise for professors in tweed jackets debating semantics. It is a vital, urgent practice. There is a quote from the German poet Goethe referenced in the book. He who cannot draw on 3,000 years is living from hand to mouth.
Wow.
When we don't understand the historical ideas that shaped our society, when we don't understand how Locke shaped our politics, or how Descartes shaped our science, or how Marx shaped our economics, we are just surviving on whatever assumptions are handed to us today. We are culturally malnourished. Philosophy gives us the long view.
By understanding the trajectory from Democritus trying to find the eternal atoms of nature, all the way to Sartre demanding that we take responsibility for our own existence, we equip ourselves to navigate our own modern anxieties. We learn that questioning reality, refusing to be indifferent, is the most profoundly human thing we can do.
Which brings us to our final lingering thought for you to take away today. We started this deep dive by asking who you are and where the world comes from. We followed Sophie as she navigated the agonizing realization that she was just a character in Major Albert Nagg's mind.
Right!
But then, as readers, we realize that Major Albert Nagg, the author, is himself just a character in Jostein Gaarder's mind. The box just keeps opening to reveal another box. So, I want to leave you with this question. Whose mind are you living in?
It forces you to look at the boundaries of your own reality.
When you go to the bathroom later tonight and you look in the mirror, pause for a second. Ask yourself, are you the one winking, or are you just the reflection?
That is a thought designed to keep you staring at the ceiling tonight.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one. Thank you for joining us in the Book Nook today. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss an exploration. Until next time, stay curious, and whatever you do, keep climbing up that rabbit's fur.